Do you consider yourself a sensitive person, or do you know people who are on the more sensitive end of the spectrum? Well, I certainly fall in the sensitive category. So I wanted to take time in this video to talk about how sensitivity is actually a superpower. And the impetus for this was actually something that I heard Emma Watson say on her recent interview with Jay Shetty. Now, this topic has been on my list of topic ideas for probably over a year, so that's not the entire reason I'm doing it, but it kind of prompted me to finally get it recorded. So this video will be all about HSPs, or highly sensitive people, how to work with them if you have sensitive people in your life, and really how sensitivity is an incredible superpower when harnessed effectively. If you have not subscribed to my channel, I encourage you to please do that. I also have a newsletter email list if you'd like to subscribe to that. And one thing we're going to talk about a lot that sensitive people often struggle with is social anxiety and feeling confident speaking to strangers and speaking in public or speaking in general. So if that's you, or if you know someone who that might affect and you're looking for ways to embody your most authentic self and show up with authenticity as the real you with confidence, then I highly encourage you to check out my online course called Show Up Sure: Secrets to Embody Confidence for a Lifetime. The link for that is in the description. There's a full 30-day money-back guarantee. And if you're looking for a free resource or two, I also have a poetic pep talk, which is less than 10 minutes, but it'll get you going, get you started, and put you in a positive, energized, inspired state throughout your day, as well as a perspective shift document that includes my favorite tips and tricks to help people overcome their deepest insecurities and put things into perspective to embody their highest selves. You may or may not have heard the term HSP, which stands for highly sensitive person. I've touched on this in other videos, but if you're new to this channel or you just don't remember, highly sensitive person is not just someone who is overly emotional. This is actually a term coined by Elaine Aron, who wrote a book about the highly sensitive person. And it affects, if I'm not mistaken, 20 to 25% of the general population. And sensitivity includes more than just emotions. Highly sensitive people tend to be more attuned to bright lights, loud noises, smells, any sensory input. Sensitive people tend to feel more strongly, and at an emotional level, we tend to process things more deeply. We tend to be very aware of everything that's happening in the environment, things that are happening with other people. And a lot of times in our society and culture, we call someone sensitive with a negative implication. Sensitivity often implies weakness or vulnerability, or that someone doesn't know how to handle their emotions, or they're emotionally unstable, when in fact, when we're aware that we're a sensitive person and we learn tools to use that to our advantage, our whole life can change. And if you don't identify as a sensitive person, there's likely someone in your life who is. And when you understand their level of sensitivity, how they process the world, or you at least can have some compassion for understanding how they process the world, then it can change the whole dynamic and improve your relationship. So personally, I learned about this maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, and it changed everything for me. I took a quiz, which if you're interested, it's on the highlysensitiveperson.com website. I believe that's the website. But Google HSP or highly sensitive person, take the quiz, see if you fall into that category. When I realized that I am indeed a highly sensitive person, it just felt so liberating, because in a way it justified the way that I see things and the way that I process things that for my whole life was considered a negative thing. And then when I shared this with my mom, she also is a highly sensitive person. She ordered the book, she read the book, so transformative, not only for her, but for her relationship with my father, because he then understood why she takes things so personally and why she gets so thrown off if there's music playing in the background, or why the temperature really affects her so much, or whatever the case may be. And he was able, and now still is able, to reconcile something that to him seems like a little over the top, and recognize, oh, she's more acutely aware of that sensory stimulus or that emotional input, that's her sensitivity at play. It's not that I did something wrong or that she's perceiving something wrong intentionally. It's her sensitivity. And I've watched how that's really improved their relationship and their understanding of one another. Because as a sensitive person, knowing that that's the case and that you fall into that category, it helps you realize that not everybody does. So not only my dad now see that my mom is a little more sensitive, or a lot more sensitive, but she was also able to recognize that he's not. And that's neither good or bad. It's not here nor there. But when we as sensitive people can realize, like, oh, we're wired a little differently, that person may not be. And so them not being as attuned to something that we would have been attuned to in them doesn't mean they don't love us. It doesn't mean they're trying to ignore us. It just means they're not aware of it. So in her recent interview with Jay Shetty, Emma Watson talked about this and how when she realized that she could harness her sensitivity as a positive, it changed her life. So I just want to read the quote that she shared on the podcast. She said, "Until maybe recently, I did not know how to give myself grace and navigate seeing my sensitivity as a strength and knowing that it's my gift. But it also means I have to care for it in specific ways. When you are given gifts, you often have to compensate in some other ways." And I just thought that was beautiful, and it is something to bring to light, because a lot of artists, a lot of performers are sensitive people. And a lot of times it doesn't get identified, and we're just brushed under the rug as like, oh, okay, why are you doing that? Sometimes it doesn't get identified, or we may never realize that about ourselves. Or like I said, and like she said, is we notice it, but we think it's a bad thing. So go take the quiz, see if you qualify as a sensitive person, or see if there's someone in your life who you can recognize, oh, my sister's so sensitive, I wonder if this is her. Or my coworker always takes things personally and is always complaining about the temperature, maybe this is them. Because you'll see it's actually a question of the nervous system and how the nervous system is wired. And then you'll learn how to relate to those people better. And once you take the quiz, if you are a sensitive person, a highly sensitive person, HSP, here's what I recommend. 2 things that I want to cover in this video. The first thing is take radical responsibility for your sensitivity. We often, especially as sensitive people, will assume we didn't do anything wrong and we'll assume there's a problem with someone or some external factor outside of us. So they were too loud, or they were insensitive, they didn't pay attention to me, and we fault someone else or an external stimuli that makes us uncomfortable, as opposed to what I recommend trying to do is taking responsibility for your sensitivity and recognizing the potential motivation behind the person's behavior that may have nothing to do with you. So for example, instead of me defaulting to saying, they're just insensitive, they don't care about me, I can ask myself, is this true that they don't care about me? Could they be seeing this a different way? For me, here's how I would process the situation. But they're not me. And when we can zoom out and acknowledge we process things slightly differently than they might. I mean, everyone processes everything differently. So this is always a good exercise, sensitive or not. But especially if you're sensitive, we have the tendency to take things very personally. So getting in the habit of zooming out and saying, what could potentially be going through this person's mind that has nothing to do with me? Maybe they canceled their plans because they really were busy at work, not because they were trying to avoid us, or whatever story that we've fabricated in our mind. And then another way you can take responsibility for your sensitivity is if you know, for example, you're sensitive to sound, bring earplugs with you wherever you go so that you know if you're going to a concert, wear earplugs, or you're going to a club, or you're going somewhere where there's going to be a lot of loud noises, wear earplugs. If you go to a restaurant and they're playing loud music, see if you can be sat outside or sat in an area where it's not quite so loud. Or bring a sweater with you if you know you're sensitive to temperature. Do whatever you can to make yourself comfortable knowing what your sensitivities are. Bring sunglasses if you know you're sensitive to a lot of bright lights. And sometimes people may think it's extreme or weird or different. And as a sensitive person, you're going to be very aware of what other people are thinking of you. But to that, I say, remember, we are all the movie stars of our own lives. Someone may look at you funny and think, oh, that's a little extreme to have earplugs on in the club. But who cares? They're not going to think more than 10 seconds about it. And if they do, that's on them. So you have to take responsibility for your own comfort, and you have to take responsibility for your own sensitivity to make sure that you enjoy your experience to the max. I had an experience with this last night, actually. I went to this little spiritual conscious conversations is what it's called, this little discussion group. And at first, everything was fine. But then they started serving food. And I have an aversion to chewing sounds. And this person, he was a good, maybe like 7 feet away from me. He was 2 or 3 chairs away from me. And he just chewed so loudly. And I was sitting there like getting so agitated, like, oh my gosh, I cannot even focus on what is being said. I need him to finish. But I had to try my best to stay calm. What I could have done in a reactive state, which is what we're trying to prevent by taking responsibility for our own sensitivity, I could have reacted and freaked out and been like, can you stop chewing so loudly? Or like looked over at him, or just, even if I didn't say anything, internally be really stressed. But instead I chose to say, okay, I notice this is making me uncomfortable. I'm going to breathe through it. I'm going to try to focus on what's being said. I'm going to wait for it to be over. Was it irritating? Yes. Was it worth me spending a whole lot of my mental energy on? No, because I couldn't change it. And it wasn't worth making him feel bad about chewing. Like, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He wasn't intentionally chewing loudly. He wasn't chewing with his mouth open. He was just a loud chewer. And I don't like it. But to each his own. I had to accept that. And so another alternative, though, if you're like, I cannot accept this, is take yourself out of the situation. I could have made up an excuse to leave. I could have changed seats and made up an excuse for why I need to change seats. I could have run to the bathroom or whatever. When I used to live in New York City, if I went on the subway and let's say I had a seat on the subway and someone sat down next to me and they were chewing gum and I couldn't tolerate the sound, I would literally get up. I would give up my seat. And even if that meant I had to stand, because I couldn't take the sound. And that is what I mean by take radical responsibility for your own sensitivity. You may or may not be able to change the other person's behavior. It may not be appropriate. On the same vein, I remember one time in college, this girl sat down next to me and she was smacking her gum and we were about to take a big exam. And I asked her I said, I have an aversion to chewing sounds. Do you mind spitting out your gum before our test? And she was offended and mortified. And she was like, I have a cold. I have no idea how chewing gum and having a cold is related, but she didn't want to chew out her gum. She said, I'm just going to suck on it. So it was fine. So she didn't chew her gum during the test, but there were plenty of other exams that I remember sitting through where I was like, oh my gosh, this person is smacking their gum. If I'm in a movie theater and someone's like wiggling their foot, I have literally figured out how to put my hair in a way that it kind of creates a shield so I can't see these fidgeting movements going on around me. And now that I say that out loud and admit that, that sounds a little extreme, but I'm sensitive. And I could tap on every person's shoulder and say, hey, stop fidgeting, but that's unrealistic. And it's really not fair because everyone's entitled to their own life and their own behavior. And it's not wrong for them to wiggle their foot while watching a movie or for them to chew gum on the subway. So I have to take responsibility for that and learn how to adapt and either calm myself in the situation or exit the situation. What was really funny about last night, though, funny, as soon as the man threw away his plate, I was like, phew. And then the woman next to him had a water bottle, like a disposable water bottle, and she was just like tapping her fingers on it, and it was making this noise. And it was so irritating. And I was like, okay, just stay calm. I kept looking over at her, and I think at some point she maybe realized that I was getting annoyed, or for some reason she stopped and she moved her hand position. Maybe I just willed her to do it, or my prayers were strong enough that she stopped. But she stopped, and it was like, okay, I can calm down. But either way, my whole point is that that's about me. That is me. That is not their problem. That is 100% my issue to address. It's a challenge for my nervous system. When someone does something and we know them well, like let's say, for example, it was a friend, I could say, hey, will you stop fidgeting? And they know me. They understand, like, okay, oh, that actually, I remember one of my best friends, Molly, she and I used to host a podcast together called The Lost Art of Communication. If you're interested in checking it out, it's still available on all platforms. But Molly was a big fidgeter, and she would shake her legs. And we were roommates for a few years. We did a lot of traveling together, and she knew I couldn't take it. And it was a little bit of a point of contention where I'd have to ask her to, like, calm down. But then once I took the HSP test, and she did too, and she realized she is not sensitive, and I am, I think that gave her a lot more empathy for me. And she was always very sweet about not doing it when she remembered, but sometimes she'd get frustrated. She'd be like, I just need to fidget my leg. And so it helped our relationship, though, because I was able to communicate and say, hey, this really stresses me out, and if we're going to be on a 7-hour plane ride together, it would really help me if you would try to relax your leg. And then she would, because she's my friend and she cares about me, or she would do it the best that she could. And so take responsibility for your own reactions. You know the things that are going to trigger you. So if you can talk to the person, communicate about your sensitivity, do it. If you cannot, try to work on it internally. I find meditation to be super helpful for this because ever since I started meditating, I'm able to calm my triggers when my nervous system does get aroused a lot more easily. And if you're not a sensitive person, but you have an HSP in your life, be patient with them. Be sensitive to their sensitivity. And if that means you have to keep the house at a certain temperature because they just cannot handle if it's too cold or too hot, bear with them. If it means you can't fidget or you have to chew with your mouth closed or whatever it is that bothers them, or maybe some people are really sensitive to smells. Maybe that means you're not going to wear the same cologne or the same perfume that you used to out of empathy for them. And I think it's worth it because if you're not a highly sensitive person, you may not recognize the extent to which this can affect a person. I have had situations where I've been at dinner and the music was really loud and I could barely focus on what the other person was saying. And they were telling me, there was one time in particular, where my friend was telling me like really important stuff and I could barely focus because of the music. And eventually I had to say, I'm sorry, I'm so distracted. The music is really loud. And there was nothing either of us could do about it. I think actually we may have asked the waitress if we could turn it down a little bit because it was that bad. But my point is, a lot of times a sensitive person is not going to tell you because they don't want to be too much. They don't want to seem like a burden. They don't want to seem weird. Some of this stuff just like sounds so extreme. So they may not tell you that this is bothering them. And then it's going to affect your relationship, even if it's at a below the surface level. They may not express it. You may not know that they missed everything you just said. And you may think, why are they not paying attention to me? Why are they not fully present with me? And they're not trying to not be present with you. But if they're distracted by some other stimuli, it's really hard to focus. So if you notice that the person you're with seems distracted, or if you can tell like they're a little sensitive or finicky with things, ask them if they've heard of a highly sensitive person, if they've taken the HSP test. There are tons of resources online with how to navigate being a sensitive person and how to navigate being in relationship, friendship, coworker, whatever, romantic relationship with a sensitive person. And it's so worth it because this does affect 20 to 25% of the population. There is someone in your life who's a sensitive person. So it's worth getting to know. So yes, the sensitive person, I recommend take responsibility for your own sensitivity, communicate about it when you can, make adjustments to your environment when you can, and then when you can't, own it, know that that's your internal experience, and do everything you can to relieve yourself of whatever stress you're feeling because of it. And then if you know someone who's highly sensitive, be sensitive to that. Yes, it's ultimately their responsibility, but there's a lot that you can do to help them and to make them feel more comfortable. Now, the second thing that is huge, and really what Emma Watson was talking about, is I encourage everybody, sensitive or not, to view high sensitivity as a gift. It truly is a superpower. So sometimes some sensitive people have like an incredible sense of smell or an incredible sense of hearing or an incredible vision or whatever it is. Because our senses are so heightened, it makes us more aware of everything, which can get distracting. It can get overwhelming. This is why sensitive people get overwhelmed in noisy environments or crowded environments. But it also is really cool when you're like, oh, I know what flower that is, or oh, I can hear really well, or whatever the case may be. Physically, it can be a really cool skill to have. And emotionally, it is a superpower because sensitive people pick up on things and we're very intuitive. And so if you have a sensitive person in your life, they likely listen really well to you. They likely remember things about you. They likely ask you really good questions and really care about you. And that's the beauty of sensitivity, is sensitive people pick up on other people's emotions, and they're usually able to help be with that person going through those emotions. They have a lot of empathy. Yes, this can sometimes go too far where we pick up on other people's energies and we carry other people's negativity or whatever. But when managed appropriately, it really is a gift and it's something to be celebrated. So if you are a sensitive person, I encourage you to view it as a gift and share those gifts with the world. Usually that's conducive to a lot of creativity. Create art. Share your ideas. Share your thoughts, because you're going to see the world in a different way than 80% of the population. And that's a really, really beautiful thing. Now, a lot of what I talk about on this channel is around social anxiety and building your confidence. A lot of sensitive people really struggle with this, and most highly sensitive people are considered introverted and they want to be to themselves. there is a subset of highly sensitive people who enjoy the spotlight. That's what I fall into, or it's like 20% of the 20% of sensitive people who actually really like being in the spotlight, but it's this constant conflict between wanting to be in the spotlight and then getting so overwhelmed and overstimulated that it's a real big challenge. But it's worth it, navigating it. I'm working on it. But my point is, a lot of highly sensitive people struggle with social confidence because social situations can be so overwhelming. Not only environmentally is there potentially a lot of stimuli, but emotionally, psychologically, that's a lot to deal with. Other people's energies, picking up on other people's emotions, and then our own insecurities. Sensitive people tend to be really hard on themselves and to think everything is about them and to take things personally. So going to a party and networking, it's a huge task for a really sensitive person. And so when you frame it as my sensitivity is a gift and view yourself that way, you're going to the party to offer a perspective that other people may not have. You're going to the party to be a listening ear for people that they might not get. And yes, share. Talk about your own stuff too. You don't have to just listen, but remember that you're a treasure. HSPs are often referred to as orchids because orchids are very sensitive and they die really easily if you don't take good care of them. But they're so beautiful when they're well taken care of. And it's rare and it's precious. So view yourself, you HSPs, as a gift. And all the people who don't consider yourself sensitive, who have these people in your life, consider those people a gift and know that they just need a little extra time and attention, but you likely notice the things they do that are different from other people in a good way, and the superpower that can really offer. If you really struggle with social confidence, I encourage you to check out some of my other videos, as well as my online course that I mentioned earlier, Show Up Shore's Secrets to Embody Confidence for a Lifetime. This was created by an HSP for sensitive and non-sensitive people, but it certainly has the lens of, if you're sensitive, you can do this, because I did it and I know that it's possible. And it's worth getting comfortable talking to people and knowing your own boundaries, knowing your own limits. So I'm a social person. I love going out and socializing. I've even gotten comfortable public speaking. And I know that my nervous system is sensitive and does get overwhelmed easily. So I can only do things so much. I'm not going to go out every single night. I'm not going to public speak every day. When I have a speaking engagement, I know that the rest of the day I need to be to myself. I need to do things that calm my nervous system. I need to take care of my body and my mind and my energy before engaging in an event like that. And I know that I'll probably be really tired after, and so I give myself that time. Sensitive people, HSPs, can do anything that non-sensitive people can. You might just need a little extra time to cool down after and to take care of yourself afterwards or even before to get you ready for it. And you're doing it with the advantage of having sensitivity as a superpower. So I would love to hear your thoughts about this. Do you consider yourself a highly sensitive person? Are there people in your life that you are suspecting are highly sensitive? Either way, I encourage you to take the quiz. I will link it in the video description. Let me know the biggest superpower that you find in your sensitivity, or even share the biggest challenge that it's posed for you and ways that you found to overcome it. And if you don't have ways to overcome it, leave a comment and we as a community can help you. Thank you so much for watching. Please share this with anyone who you feel could benefit, and see you in the next video.